And we're live. Ariel, Hivemapper, what's going on, dog? Good to see you again.
Good seeing you, man. By
Yeah,
the way, you
always.
were like, I think one of the very early folks that learned about Hivemapper. Like when we were doing like a third party dash cam back in the day, even before we made the switch to crypto, I think you found us super
Yeah,
early.
yeah, that dash cam is
So
still in my truck.
yeah, so it's kind of like fun to see and like always talk to you because yeah, you're the OG.
Become well, one of them. I'm sure people were before me. So the one of the super cool things, and I say this every time, and I won't stop saying it, is that you are one of those founders out there in the deep in space who is leading from the front. Just the other day, you did what was it, an 8 hour drive? Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
crushing testing this thing. I'm always so impressed.
Well, over the weekend in the desert, 2 days. The first day was like 9 hours. Second day was like 7 hours, and there was like
God,
three of us.
God dang.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a nice segue into you've got this new OS. What are you finding out? What are you excited about it?
Well, quite frankly, it's probably the Dashcam OS that we should have launched with, just to be like full on. And it is so incredibly easy and passive. And you just install it. You install the Dashcam, and then you just drive, right? And you can drive for 8 to 10 hours with your car in the phone, with your phone in the car. Your wife could take the car and go do something else with it, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then after, it depends how where you're driving and how fast you're driving and a bunch of other factors. But like roughly 8 to 10 hours later, the dash cam will fill up. Then you connect your phone to the dash cam. Boom! It transfers all the imagery to your phone, and then later on the night or the day, whatever it is, when you're connected to Wi-Fi, it will automatically upload it.
Yeah.
Um, so it is just a really easy experience. And, especially like a lot of the Uber drivers and a lot of the Lyft drivers all over the world are just saying like, this is a game changer for us. And people who are managing fleets, they're like, look, it was really hard to manage,
Yeah.
right? When you have like 10 people calling you or 20 people calling you saying, hey, I ran into this issue, I ran into that issue. Like now there's like, very few, if any, customer support issues.
Yeah, I was just talking to Leo Wortley, who came out to Hivemapper Fleet Day, and it was the guy who's like, "Yeah, the way I'm going to find a fleet is I'm going to get in an Uber and tell that guy about it. I'm going to get in another Uber and tell that guy about it." Like, he's just going down the line doing the same kind of thing you do, like just putting in the work. And he was saying this new thing is so much easier than it was. So it's super cool to see. And of course, you got Max as well. Max is like the hardest customer out there, where he's like, "I didn't use the app before because it's too much of a pain in the ass," and then the new one came out, and I'm using it all the time now. So
Yeah.
it's when Max says something nice, you know something really good has happened.
He actually messaged me on Twitter. He's like, dude, I actually wasn't mapping because it was just like pretty annoying. Exactly that. But he's like, it's so much better now. It's so much easier. So
Yeah,
yeah, that was that. And we started to see it as soon as like we used it internally, like very early on. We're like, oh, this is it. This is obvious. And then we started giving it out to people, just like other testers, like a smaller, and they're like, oh my God, like I want, like I want this tomorrow. Like I just want to use
yeah.
this as like the production
Ship.
thing. So it became like really clear, and the team here just felt that energy and felt that pull, and they're like, all right, we got to get this out. Like we have to get this out. Like, and that became like the most important thing that we were focused on.
And you guys are pretty good at focusing on the most important thing. One of which is the new price. Now you guys had a short stop at a
Yeah,
significant number on the way down,
yeah,
um, which is funny. But now it's at $299
yeah,
for the camera.
yeah.
Um, I guess what are the implications of that globally? Because in the U.S. maybe it's not as big as deal, first world country. We can kind of do that, but globally that can have some huge implications. Kind of getting down to a much lower price.
Yeah, I mean, well, let me give a little bit of context on this because I think like when we built that dash cam, we sourced all the components for that during the height of the global supply chain issues, like
Yep.
in COVID.
Yep.
And so we paid a lot, right? And there's some really great components on that dash cam that were hard to get our hands on. But we wanted to make sure that we had enough inventory. So, quite frankly, we just paid whatever we had to pay
Yep.
to get those components. And so that's why we started off with that price at 550 initially. Over the last 6 months, as we've gotten those components down in price from suppliers, and this is true for almost every single component in the device. And then B, as we're kind of work out all the manufacturing kinks, we're able to bring the cost of what it costs to buy the components and then what it costs to assemble.
Yep.
And so, we then had a decision to make, which was, okay, we can keep more profits for ourselves, but we're not really a hardware company and we're not trying to optimize profits on hardware. We can pass these back to the people who are buying them now. And then I think this is kind of what you're alluding to. If you look at the map right now, the map is growing fantastically in the US, EU, in places like Japan and South Korea and Singapore, effectively high GDP countries.
Yep.
But the map we need everywhere. And so look, like we made a decision to bring the price down because otherwise we're just going to keep all the profits to ourselves and not really grow the map in all these different places. And so I understand how that's frustrating to some people who maybe bought it at 550, but that is fundamentally the truth of kind of like what happened and how we're thinking about it and what we're optimizing for.
Yeah. And you guys have always been really good about being super sensible and pretty transparent about like, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's why we think it sucks. And here's why we're doing it because we think it's eventually going to be great. So it's cool to kind of hear the backstory behind the price. Do you think we'll see it go lower, or is it pretty reasonable to say like, let's just buy these things at $299?
I mean, I don't see that happening in like the next 3, 6, 9 months, right? What would have to happen is we would have to basically go back to the drawing board and, select specific components and find alternatives to them. So the Raspberry Pi is one example of that, where the Raspberry Pi is definitely a little bit pricier, a little bit more supply chain constrained. And so there are definitely alternatives to that. But if we go and swap that out, that's a meaningful amount of software changes, a meaningful amount of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering work that needs to happen.
Yep. One specific thing, and maybe this is like top secret business information, is that on Hivemapper side, is that Max and I are seeing that in South America, and I think Brazil specifically, but maybe throughout South America as well, mining still makes a lot of sense. Where in the US, it doesn't make as much sense as it used to. It used to be, batshit crazy. Are you seeing that on the Hivemapper side? Are you seeing some of your sales start to really push into South America specifically?
So sorry, when you say mining, is like you're talking about helium mining makes more sense in those areas?
Yeah, I should have been more clear. Yeah, helium mining made sense a ton early on. Like it was batshit crazy, and then it kind of calmed down to more reasonable levels.
Yeah,
and then mining in general as well.
I mean, there's different aspects. There's once you set up a miner and you provide coverage for that area, and let's say there's 4 or 5 per hex. I don't know what the rules are. You probably know this better than I do with helium. Sure. But then it's like you're done. You're effectively done, right? Assuming like the person doesn't turn them off. With a map, you have to constantly be refreshing it, right? And so, yes, there will be a point, like if you look at like a place like Los Angeles or even Seoul, Korea, that you will start to be like, okay, we don't need more dashcam contributors, right? But we just need to maintain the ones that we currently have there, and that would be sufficient. We haven't really, there's maybe a couple of regions that are starting, I think Singapore is another one that is starting to reach that point where it's like you don't need that many more.
Right.
But it also very much depends on the kinds of the drivers you have. Like there are some areas where it's like all Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. So obviously you need fewer of those than people who drive like me, who drive like an hour and a half every single day.
Are you driving that much, dude?
Yeah.
We got to get you just living in the office. You don't drive at all.
Yeah, and it test the product.
Yeah. I like it. Let's see. Let's do kind of next big obstacles, next big challenges. Let's start with the obstacle one. What's the next thing that you guys see is like, hey, this is a hurdle we have to get over in the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, if you start to look at like the Map AI trainers, what's really happening there with those Map AI trainers? Behind the scenes, the Map AI is effectively detecting objects. So it's saying, okay, that's a 35 mile per hour speed limit sign. And this is its exact position in the world. And then the Map AI trainers are these like little games that you can play, and you earn honey for them, by the way. And you're effectively confirming or teaching the AI, yes, that is in fact a 35 mile per hour speed limit sign. And so there's 2 parts of this. One is scaling that up, right? Such that we get there's 2 components of this. One is precision. So, okay, that is in fact a 35 mile per hour speed limit sign. Yep. And then there's another aspect of this, which is recall, which is if you say, hey, I have coverage of this road, that you are in fact picking up all of the speed limit signs across that road, right? So that's recall.
Okay.
And so doing that and then positioning those objects in the correct place is really hard. Specifically, the positioning aspect is particularly challenging because for a whole host of reasons, which I can get into that are fairly technical, but doing that at scale, not just here in the US, but Europe, where they have different sign types, right? Different traffic laws, all that kind of stuff. That's really, really challenging. But that's fundamentally what goes into building a map. And that's the valuable part, right? The imagery is effectively just the raw ingredient that gets fed to the map AI. So now what we're doing is the map AI is saying, well, I couldn't actually position this as well as I would like to, right? Like we define what that is.
Yep.
I need another angle of that, right? Or I need like that from a different vantage point, right?
Yep.
So then, and this isn't live yet, what we'll start to do is basically incentivize people to be mapping in specific roads where there's gaps.
Yep.
And so it's like this relationship, or this symbiotic relationship between the collection side and then the map AI, as the map AI knows what it needs, right? And then there's a collection side saying, hey, what do I need? Or how can I help? And they're kind of talking to each other all the time.
Oh, it's amazing. And you guys are leaning into this AI thing hard. That's got to have people drilling as far as like, all right, what happens when you mix these two things together? So it's got to be exciting on the company side. What's on the horizon as far as UX improvements? What's the user going to see that's going to improve kind of drastically, radically, maybe just even a little bit over the next couple of months?
Well, there's kind of two groups in terms of the contributors specifically. There's kind of two kinds of people. There's a set of people who are just like, look, I want this thing, totally set it and forget it. And that's awesome. That's great, right? And then there's another kind of people who are like, no, I'm going to be in the app, right? Why? Because I'm looking for very specific locations that I want to go map. I have an extra 10, 15 free minutes. I'm going to pick somebody at the airport. I'm going to look for a route that is more productive in terms of honey tokens earnings and where there's not coverage. Or there's people who are like in there doing buzz reports, like, hey, this road is flooded. Hey, there's police activity. So those are generally speaking, they're two different kinds of people. And so I'd say like 90% of our effort has been focused on the set it and forget it type of audience, right? Yep. Because, even me, like I don't have the app open all the time. I'm just like, hey, I'm driving, I'm going to pick up the kids or going to do this or going to do that. Like, I'm just not thinking about it. And I just want it there in the background doing its thing for me. But yeah, there's a different kind of audience, which is like, I want to engage in it. And now we're starting to think about them, right? And saying, okay, how do we make this more fun? Yep. Like there's one idea of, like eating the hexes, like a Pac-Man, right? Like as it's going, like kind of eating the hexes would be kind of cool. It's going to make that noise as well. Definitely going to make that.
I love it. Recorded. Done. We'll give that back to you. Yeah.
And then giving people like navigation where they're like, okay, here's how you get to A to B. This is like the fastest route. But if you have an extra 10 minutes or 5 minutes, here's a different route that will earn you a little bit more. And what we're hearing from people is like, that's a lot of fun because I get to see a different part of the city that I maybe didn't always see. So there's a like exploratory aspect to it. It's not as monotonous, right? Yep. So like we'll start to explore some of those areas a little bit more in the coming weeks and the coming months.
Right on. And that's something you've been working on a while. I think the last time that you and I sat down up at the office, that was something that you and I think Gabe had talked about. You're like, hey, we just launched this thing. We're really starting to direct where we want people to go. So this is not like hey, we just thought of this last week and we're doing it. You guys have been working on this for a while.
Yeah. Like that, like the set and forget it part was definitely the harder from a technical perspective because like a lot of stuff had to move on to the dash cam. Like the dash cam had to have a lot more smarts than it previously did, which is great. But what's kind of cool, like I guess for people who like were with us in the early days and bought the early dash cam, you've just seen like the dash cam that you bought 6 months ago or whatever when we launched, it's almost like a different, although it has the same components than it used to have, it's almost a different piece of hardware, right? It has like totally new capabilities that just simply did not exist. One thing that we're starting to do is actually do a lot of the privacy masking. So this is basically blurring people's faces as well as license plates and doing that at the edge, right? Such that, none of the imagery that ultimately makes it up to Hivemapper has people's faces and license plates and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. That was a big question in the early days.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Well, last one before we sign off. I know we want to keep this pretty short. You got a super busy day ahead of you. Is what are we looking at for when the S is going to be shipping? I'm super excited to see mine.
Yeah, what's funny about the ass is like we gave people because it's been delayed and like we feel really badly about that. We
Yeah.
feel we definitely let some people down
Yeah.
to be really transparent about it. But look, there's I think about 20 of these devices. There are some that are actually not just in the hands of Hivemapper employees, but kind of all over the world. So it exists and people are starting to put us through its paces.
Yeah.
And we're slowly starting to increase the manufacturing of that. So I think that hopefully by June, we'll start to like ship them out to hundreds of people.
Yep.
Probably not thousands of people in June, but hopefully hundreds of people in. And it's kind of funny is like we gave people an opportunity to switch, if they had ordered the S and they were frustrated and they want to start mapping.
Yep.
And it has the exact same characteristics from a mapping perspective as Hivemapper Dashcam.
Yep.
And a lot of people were like, no, I just want the S. Like
Yeah, that's how I was like, no, I want to see this thing. This is what this one
and
wants.
so even though it's more expensive and from a mapping perspective, it's the exact same, it does have some additional features that are important to certain types of drivers. But other than that, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, well, I'm psyched to get it whenever you guys have it. There's basically no way to disappoint me at this point. I think what you guys have been doing as far as building the project, being really transparent about it, both the kind of big wins as well as the big losses has been just super cool and an admirable way to do it. So I appreciate you guys doing it the way you're doing it.
I appreciate that, Nick. That means a lot.
Right on, dude. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Be psyched to have you back on next time. We got some cool updates for Hivemapper. Thanks, Ariel.
Thank you. Thank you.